What's going on? Welcome back to the channel. So today when I talk to you about Opendoor, I want to go over some expectations for this upcoming week, what might cause volatility in the stock price, and go over everything else you need to know. But first, make sure to hit that thumbs up, and with that, let's get right to it. So starting off with macro data, we do have a lot of Fed speakers throughout this whole week, pretty much kicking off Monday morning. And depending on what they say, whether it be in regards to tariffs, inflation, or whatever else, or just generally the interest rates, that could move Opendoor, because Opendoor tends to be very reactive to a lot of those hot topics. Because again, as I've mentioned in the past, I do believe that Opendoor is a very big momentum stock. So for instance, if a lot of Fed speakers come out, reconfirm pretty much what Powell mentioned, which speaking of Powell, yours truly is actually speaking on Tuesday, but if he does reconfirm that about 50 basis points worth of cuts is anticipated in 2025 still, then that's going to really propel a lot of growth stocks and Opendoor higher. But market does currently believe that 50 basis points is on the table. So right now a 91.9% likelihood for the October 29th meeting for a 25 basis point cut, and then a following 25 basis point cut for the December 10th. In my opinion, neither of these have actually been priced in, so that could be as well a good catalyst. But pretty much from now until October the 29th, it's going to feel like light years away. But aside from all of that, though, we also do have some big data coming out this week. So GDP coming out Thursday, and then PCE on Friday. So a lot of the data points and everything I just mentioned will cause a lot of volatility. Aside from that, though, companies unveiling the earnings, only one to really watch for is going to be Micron, coming out Tuesday after hours, and that could really move the tech AI stocks, which generally tend to kind of move the broader market as a whole. So that one's going to be one to kind of watch for. Specific to Opendoor, there hasn't been any news. So last news did come out on the 17th. So most likely if they do put out some sort of positive news, that could also really push the stock price a little bit higher. But aside from that, there isn't really anything planned as far as fireside chats, interviews. Kaz does tend to be, in my interpretation, more of a free spirit. So if he does a interview or plans to do an interview, he's not really letting anyone know ahead of time. Last post from him was this, so on the 20th at 6:54, just ultimately signaling that Opendoor is expanding. And you can kind of see that as well from their website. So they're hiring a lot of good positions. So generally this is a good thing to look at from an investor standpoint, is expansion. So always positive. One thing that I didn't understand is all these India positions. So this one is remote. So India remote, senior analytics engineer, a lot of which are in the States aside from that, but India right here. So I'm not really sure exactly why, because I kind of searched it a little bit and it looks like this came out in February. So February 12th, 2025, looks like they are cutting the jobs in India. So I don't know if there was a lot more positions prior to that announcement or not, but if anyone is aware why they are hiring so much in India, kind of odd to me, but maybe more better skilled labor in India than the States or something like that. So I don't know if anyone's aware of that. Let me know your general thoughts on that in the comments below. As far as shorts, so on Friday, they did increase 2.12 million shares. Going into this upcoming week, 23.74% of the free float is being shorted, works out to be 158.38 million shares overall being shorted. Cost of borrow average has been kind of lingering around that 5% range, so sitting at 5.5 right now. So it's not really doing too much. And just generally from this yellow line, you can kind of see that shorts haven't really been as well doing any crazy moves. So ultimately still sitting between that 22 and 24% range. So most likely they will be fairly volatile and active this week, dependent on what Fed speakers do mention. So just somewhat be aware of that. From a bull standpoint, from the options, there is a consensus for it to be roughly around that 10.50 to 11. So a good push higher is anticipated. Bears are anticipating for it to be sub 850. So where it did close ultimately at 953, it's kind of smack dab in the middle. So you're going to see some extreme move in one direction, most likely this week. And once I go over the technicals, that'll make a little bit more sense. With Friday passing, so this is the open interest. With it closing again at that 957, that does mean that the 950 and below strike prices are considered in the money. So you have 36,000 at the 950, 39,000 at that 9, 16,000 at that 8, 25,000 at the 7, and anything below that, in my opinion, I think was already covered by market makers, because going into this week, I think it was fair to assume that it was going to close above 7. So most likely just that 8 to 950, those strike prices were not covered. From what we can see, there wasn't any crazy transactions after hours on Friday, so most likely that it's going to result in a little bit of a gamma squeeze. So market makers might have to cover some of those shares going into this upcoming week. Looking at this week though, so we do have 23,000 at that 10, 37,000 at 11, 12,000 at that 1050. So just take note of that by, let's say, Thursday or Friday this upcoming week. If, let's say, Opendoor is lingering around that $10, $11 range, around those strike prices, you might see shorts wake up a little bit just to try to suppress it. But ultimately, with it closing on Friday at 957, it is smack dab in the middle between this R1 and the pivot. So like I said, one of these is anticipated to be touched based on the options. So 1040 is going to be the next strong target / resistance. 844 is going to be that next strong support. One thing to take note of, there hasn't been any new analyst ratings. If, let's say, CAS does a formal actual interview with, like, let's say Bloomberg, that most likely could prompt some new ratings. And I think the last 5 or 6 ratings have been very, very poor. Even right now, the consensus over the last 3 months is $1.44, representing a 84.95% downside. If, let's say, a analyst comes out, even with like a $4 or $5 rating, I think the market will take that as a very strong positive and really start to push it higher. Or better yet, maybe you might get a double digit or something like that. But I think it's kind of overdue for some sort of analyst rating. Going into this upcoming week though, on the actual chart, as I've mentioned on my Friday video, you kind of see a little bit stronger of walls, so more willing sellers, and this is why you saw a certain level of suppression. I did a video yesterday going over why I felt Opendoor did get largely suppressed, and it's because of that new CFO announcement. A lot of people were kind of really not liking that video, even though technically it's just trying to draw some conclusion on exactly why Opendoor was going down. Whether insiders buy or sell, again, that can't tell what the future is, but in my opinion, I think that's why Opendoor did get suppressed on Friday, but I could be wrong. What do I know in life? But going into this upcoming week, you have pretty much a good battle ahead of us. Like I said, one of those two is going to be touched. Either we're going to be seeing a new 52-week high for Opendoor, which is kind of what the bulls are anticipating through the options, or you could see this gap get filled, which the bears are anticipating to happen. So anticipate a lot of volatility. For those of you that do believe in Opendoor, take advantage, buy the dips and whatnot. With Opendoor being, in my opinion, a very big momentum stock, you really want to watch for it to stay above that 10-day moving average. If you're going to see that continued momentum and have also algorithmic tradings really helping it push higher. So again, you're going to see a lot of volatility. I think there could be an argument made for both ways, up and down. And I think in reality, like I said, it's going to come down to Fed speakers. If a lot of them come out and say, hey, you know what, Powell misspoke, like the labor data, blah, 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 like doesn't justify rate cuts, then you're going to see Opendoor and many other growth stocks kind of go down as a byproduct of that. So again, what do I know in life? So let me know your general thoughts on Opendoor. Ultimately though, I do feel that by the end of the week, it will be a little bit higher, close to this R1. So between this R1 and most likely R2 is where I feel realistically it should be. I know a lot of people are under the assumption that it'll instantly jump to $15, $20. That would be absolutely epic. But for this week, I do feel that realistically, it should be kind of between these points. Unless, like I said, one of the Fed speakers drops a bomb on the broader market, freaks it the hell out, and everything else. So let me know your thoughts on Opendoor. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up, throw price predictions where you feel Opendoor is going to be by the end of the week. One final thing though, if you are looking for some solid buy signals on stocks, options, crypto, pop over to my Patreon. I put out daily day trades, numerous swing trades, worthwhile to pop over there and take a look. With all that said, appreciate all of you watching.